Okay, so forget literally everything you think you know about that classic, uplifting, rags to riches story. You know, the one where hard work and a good heart conquer all? Yeah, we're not doing that today. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into something truly fascinating and honestly, pretty unsettling. We're looking at Aravind Adiga's absolutely brilliant novel, The White Tiger. This is a dark, razor-sharp subversion of the traditional success story. It's this gripping look at ambition, class, and the terrifyingly high cost of social mobility in modern India. And honestly, it asks some really tough questions about global capitalism that affect every single one of us.
Here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at the two Indias, light and darkness. Second, the half-baked education. Third, inside the rooster coop. Fourth, chandeliers and artificial excess. And finally, we'll ask, is Ballram Halwai redeemed?
All right, Section 1, Two Indias, Light and Darkness.
Okay, let's dive right into this. To really understand our main character, Ballram, and his whole journey, we absolutely have to understand the incredibly divided, post-colonial world he's trying to navigate. The novel presents a society that is just aggressively split down the middle. On one side, we have what Ballram calls the darkness. This is rural India. We're talking about places like his home village of Laxmigar. It's characterized by this deep feudal history, the heavy black mud of the river Ganga, and it's pretty much entirely defined by a crushing lack of basic needs. No functioning hospitals, no proper schools, no reliable electricity. It's just the suffocating weight of the past. But then, on the exact opposite side, we have the light. These are the urban, globalized tech hubs like Bangalore. In this world, it's defined by frantic, artificial excess. Gleaming call centers, luxury malls, and just a super fast, ruthless capitalist hustle.
Now I want you to imagine living in a society where the boundaries aren't just geographic lines on a map, but they're profoundly philosophical. A place where the nightmares of the poor and the dreams of the rich literally never even intersect. You have the river of the darkness and the ocean of the light. And this brilliantly illustrates how they operate under entirely different rule books, completely isolated from one another, even though they share the exact same country.
Please understand, Your Excellency, that India is two countries in one, an India of light and an India of darkness. This quote right here captures Balram's binary worldview with such incredible gravitas. You see, the entire novel is actually framed as this series of late-night letters that Balram is writing to the Chinese premier. And by establishing this stark division right out of the gate, Balram is essentially setting the stage for his own violent escape. He views his life as this desperate, absolutely necessary climb out of that dark mud and into that glowing, artificial light.
Moving on to Section 2, the half-baked education.
So how exactly does someone from the darkness actually navigate their way into the light? Let's step inside Balram's mind for a second and explore what makes him such a formidable protagonist. Ballram describes himself as a half-baked Indian. He was pulled out of school as a kid to pay off family debts, right, so his formal education was never actually completed. But why is this so dangerous? Well, because when education is completely separated from morality and formally structured logic, pure survival becomes the only metric of intelligence. His worldview isn't shaped by textbooks. Instead, as he puts it, if you open our skulls, look in with a penlight, and you'll find an odd museum of ideas. It's all just pieced together through brutal, real-world observation.
What's really interesting about this half-baked profile is how he fills those massive gaps in his schooling. Ballram learns by eavesdropping on his wealthy masters, obsessively reading cheap murder magazines, and absorbing these deeply cynical political pamphlets. And all of this creates a warped, yet incredibly piercing perspective. He learns pretty quickly that the systems meant to protect people are fundamentally corrupt, and that honesty? Well, honesty is just a luxury that only the rich can afford. This totally unconventional education is exactly what forges him into the White Tiger, a creature who is willing to do absolutely whatever it takes to survive.
Okay, Section 3, inside the rooster coop.
Let's move on and see how this builds, because if the conditions in the darkness are really that terrible, you might be wondering, why don't the masses just rise up? Well, the rooster coop explains exactly why. It shows how a deeply ingrained servant mindset prevents millions of people from overthrowing just a handful of masters. It is honestly a brilliantly sinister system of control. First, you have the terrifying threat to the family. Servants know that if they rebel, their masters will exact brutal retribution on their relatives back in the village. Second, there are internal enforcers. Think of Balram's own Granny Kusum demanding strict financial loyalty. Third, the oppressed are packed in so tightly that they fight each other for tiny, tiny crumbs of power, which completely deflects their anger away from the actual masters. And finally, the whole thing becomes a psychological cage. It's a total internalization of servitude.
The anatomy of this coup is entirely psychological. The lock isn't made of iron, you guys, it's made of family loyalty. The guards aren't police officers, they're the matriarchs and the fellow servants who are just pecking at each other for scraps. The poor literally police themselves. They're trapped in this insidious cycle where they prioritize the collective survival of the family over the individual freedom of any single person.
The coup is guarded from the inside. I just want to pause for a second and let that heavy realization really sink in. It is such a profound socio-political critique. To break out of this coup, an individual has to be willing to do the unthinkable. To be truly free, you must willingly condemn your own blood to death.
Section 4. Chandeliers and Artificial Excess. Let's shift our tone here from the suffocating darkness to the frantic, blinding reality of the light that Balram finally manages to reach. When Balram successfully breaks out of the coup, which he does by murdering his master and stealing his money, he becomes a wealthy entrepreneur in Bangalore. And I want you to notice his ultimate symbol of freedom, the chandelier. It stands out as this glaring, gaudy emblem of his new extreme wealth and his arrival in the new India.
But the crucial point is that the irony here is incredibly dark. Balram buys these massive chandeliers to bathe himself in constant artificial light. He uses them to literally and metaphorically banish the darkness. I mean, think about it. He managed to escape the literal darkness of his village, only to be haunted by a psychological darkness that requires blinding, artificial light just to keep it at bay. It's a glittering distraction from his deep-seated guilt. It ensures he never has to sit in the shadows and think about the violent cost of his survival, because he knows full well that his family back in Laxmangard was likely slaughtered because of his actions.
And finally, Section 5. Is Balram Halwai redeemed?
This brings our narrative to its climax. We really have to confront the ultimate moral ambiguity of Balram's success. To answer the question of redemption, we need to look at the structure of the story itself. So, a traditional Bildungsroman is a coming-of-age story, right? It's where the protagonist learns valuable lessons and grows morally better and wiser over time. But Adiga's novel operates completely in reverse. It's an anti-Bildungsroman. In Balram's world, maintaining your traditional morality practically guarantees that you will remain a victim in the rooster coop forever. To grow up and become economically better, the protagonist actually has to become morally worse.
Notice this jarring duality here. Balram has to shed his empathy, abandon his family, and totally embrace violence just to step out of that cage. He essentially has to become a monster by traditional standards in order to become a success by capitalist standards. He doesn't actually destroy the corrupt system at all, he just ruthlessly maneuvers his way to the very top of it. He ends up operating within the exact same morally bankrupt framework that he once suffered under.
I am not a criminal. I am an entrepreneur. For Balram, slitting his master's throat wasn't a crime of passion, not at all. It was simply a cutthroat business decision required by a completely corrupt system. He neutrally rebrands murder as entrepreneurship, which, let's be real, is perhaps the darkest corporate spin in literary history. He's suggesting that in his world, breaking the law to turn bad news into good news is just what it takes to win.
Which leaves us with this final, profound question to consider. As you imagine Balram Halwai sitting under his glittering chandeliers, I want you to ask yourself, is he a triumphant, self-made entrepreneur who successfully broke a brutal generational curse? Or is he just a new monster, manufactured by a monstrous system now thriving in the artificial light? I want you to genuinely ponder that for a moment. If you were born into the suffocating darkness of the rooster coop, would you have done the exact same thing? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will leave you to think on that.